Well, welcome back. We're about to start our session on disruptive technologies that Danielle and Amy are going to take the lead in introducing. I have to say, I love that graphic that you have that's on that slide. Is that have they finally cleared that rocket for liftoff yet in Florida?
Yeah, it's borrowed. It's not all my own work.
Well, it's a really important topic, and I'm glad it's coming back to the board because, again, the idea of when we started the disruptive technology work stream was to allocate a percentage of our time to focus on disruptive issues that weren't in the day-to-day project management, because if you don't do that, you will inevitably focus on incremental improvement. And so really want to thank Amy and Danielle for spearheading all of our efforts in this regard. I mentioned it earlier in my introductory remarks for anyone who's listening in, how much material we've actually been putting up on our website to help facilitate conversation with some of our stakeholders. But most importantly, we're focused on the so what for standard setting. What does this mean for us as a board trying to make standards that are relevant to a modernizing economy, and one that may be modernized in a way that we don't expect. And this is really the genesis of the sessions we're bringing to you today. So without further ado, I hand it over. Is Danielle, you taking the lead?
Yeah, that's
okay,
right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, and thank you for inviting me to talk this afternoon. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, so I hope this is going to be a really interesting session for you, and I'm looking forward to getting your feedback. Just to introduce myself to those that are joining us online, my name is Danielle Davis, and I'm an IAASB staff fellow. I joined back in November on an 18-month secondment to support with the technology initiative, and as Tom said, primarily focused on disruptive technologies and understanding what they mean for auditing and assurance and standard setting. With me today, who is Amy, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. For everyone that doesn't know me, I'm Amy Fairchild. I'm principal for the IAASB, working with Danielle to help lead activities in this area. So also very excited to be here and talk about this topic.
And Amy and I have very carefully coordinated our outfits today to be black with polka dots, so I hope you appreciate that. I'd also like to thank Brett James, who is, I think, probably lurking at the back there, and actually, despite changing roles pretty much as I joined, has been an incredible support in this initiative and really given me some great direction. So thanks, Brett, and also to Billy and Tom for your direction and sponsorship of this initiative. So we're going to spend some time in this plenary session giving you an update on what we've been doing around disruptive technologies, and then we will have a short break and we'll move into a closed session where we will discuss some themes and topics arising from our digital advisory group discussions, and also get your thoughts and feedback on some proposed actions to take forward. There are some agenda papers that came with it. So there was a short briefing paper and a copy of this presentation. With that, I'll hand over to Amy.
Okay. Just want to check everyone can hear me. We had a last minute mic change, so yeah, okay. So I'm going to start off by explaining our overall approach to technology. It really can be divided into two areas, as you can see on the slide. The first considers how we respond to technology matters through the traditional activities in our toolbox. So what I mean by that is new international standards, revisions to existing standards, or through the development of non-authoritative guidance, such as those that have been released previously on technology by the Technology Working Group, the previous Technology Working Group. And second, on the right-hand side of the slide is really what we're going to be focused on today. And it's really about looking ahead. So keeping an eye on the horizon, so performing information gathering and research activities to better understand technology's effect on audit and assurance now and in the future, in order to be prepared for possible disruption and to be able to respond appropriately to that as an organization. So it really is built, split into three main categories, so elements here. That's how we'll be talking about it today. So building, maintaining, and sharing. The first considers, it's worth noting, so the activities and findings in the second area of the previous slide, so this is what we're going to talk about today. They influence our standard setting activities as well. So they do actually influence our more formal standard setting activities. They aren't meant to be two entirely siloed ideas. So we'll give some examples of that. So if we look at these three areas in more detail, and remembering our key overall objective of this initiative is to ensure that the IAASB standard setting keeps pace and is prepared to adapt to these disruptive technologies. So starting with build, so this really refers to building the right processes and structures to support our technology initiative. So setting the right foundations for the activities to better understand the impact of technology. So maintaining, which is the second one on the slide, sounds quite passive, but in a field like technology, it's really ever changing. Technology is ever changing. It's broad, it's far reaching. So it really is a high effort activity to ensure that our knowledge of technology trends and their implications keep pace. So we do actually have to also ensure that we spend our time evaluating what's really relevant to the people that are in this room, given the huge breadth of activity that's out there. And then finally, share. This is recognizing that the technology disruption impacts the audit and assurance ecosystem more widely. It affects the profession as a whole. So it's important to share knowledge with stakeholders within the wider reporting ecosystem, so everybody's staying up to date and engaged on the topic. So what have we been doing in these areas? So if we go on to the next slide. So for those that were around in January 2021, the initial research on disruptive technology was presented to the board at that time. It really was detailed research to look at the technology landscape in audit and assurance, and it provided an assessment on the timing of widespread adoption, as well as the expected impact on the audit and assurance of different technologies that were identified. It really was an extensive exercise that provided a starting point for continuing the monitoring of technology trends. So we'll see later how that's been leveraged going forward. We have also used this work, this initial research, to build a knowledge base for staff and for the board. We provide information on innovations and technology trends. So that's articles, videos, company-specific technology information, links, videos, other useful resources. And really the aim of that is to help to upskill the board and the staff on technology and to use it as a research resource for ongoing work plan projects. In other words, this is somewhere for the staff and the board to go to find out the latest information, key players, trends, use cases. So it's really incredibly useful. So if you haven't looked, please do check it out and use it in your activities. The final thing that we've been doing in the build is around digital advisory group, and we established that and had its inaugural meeting in May. We'll be talking a little bit more about that later on in the session. I should also mention, because it is up on the slide, we are of course lucky to second in a full-time dedicated staff fellow, so the wonderful Danielle, who was able to focus on this area exclusively, and as Tom mentioned earlier, has really been able to move this along and really give it what it needed in terms of getting things done and getting information out there. So if we move on to maintain, so we have continued to perform research and outreach activities to kind of build upon that understanding of technology trends, including discussions with practitioners, technology companies, regulators, and others within the wider ecosystem. There's also been ongoing internal technology connections with the technology consulting, the technology consultation group, so TCG. We do love an acronym, and current project teams, as well as regular liaison and touch points with IAASB, the IAER, and the IFAC technology teams. And really the idea behind this is to be working together to share the knowledge and ideas and be a resource for the projects. For example, Danielle's been providing updates to certain task forces on trends in order to be able to help with specific issues that are coming up on projects that we have, or to be able to answer questions in areas based on the research that we've been doing. And finally, we'll move on to share. So really focusing on continue to seek ways to engage with a wider ecosystem in this area regarding the trends, what we're seeing and what they mean to the profession. And that's through roundtables, through publications, coupled with the use of social media to promote awareness and to broaden the reach of our activities and contributions. So some of the examples of the things that we've done are included on the slide there. One thing that isn't on the slide, we did also have a recent publication. It's an article available on the IFAC Gateway, which summarises an academic study that was performed by the IAAR, that's the International Association for Accounting, Education and Research, and they conducted a review of literature examining digital transformation in the external audit setting. So again, finding some of this research really interesting and relevant. So if you haven't read it, check it out. I'll now hand back to Danielle, who's going to give a deeper dive into the technology landscape.
Thanks, Amy. So that's what we've been up to. And I guess now what I wanted to do is just spend some time talking to you about some of the insights and information that we've gathered from the various bits of research that we've done. This slide hopefully will be familiar with you. It was one of the slides that was presented in the original research that was done of the technology landscape. And I thought it'd be useful just to put this in here as a reminder for everyone. And the idea with this is to identify the technologies that are relevant from an audit and assurance perspective and position them in terms of their impact on audit and assurance, and also give an idea of the time scale of widespread adoption of those technologies. What I would say is when we say wide-scale adoption, what we mean is not just one or two big audit firms adopting these technologies, not just one or two countries. We're talking about wide-scale global adoption of these technologies. And actually, what's really difficult to do is work out the timing of that. So you'll notice, a lot of those technologies that are on the far right-hand side really sort of indicates the uncertainty that there is with some of these technologies as they are emerging, as to the expected impact they'll have on audit and assurance, and therefore what we need to take account of in standard setting. So what I've done in updating the technology landscape is I've actually changed the presentation format. And the reason for doing that is because of this uncertainty around the timeline. So on the next slide here, you'll see what I've done is I've altered the presentation to put the technologies that were identified back in that research along a maturity scale, giving an indication of which technologies are more mature in their development. I've tried to keep as much of the information that was gathered from that original research in terms of expected impact on audit and assurance. So I've used the little circles that you'll see on that slide to indicate the significance from an audit and assurance perspective. I've also used some color coding there to differentiate between technologies that are used by the auditor and technologies that are used by the audited entity, or indeed by both. And the reason for doing that is actually it can have a very different impact from a standard setting perspective depending on how that technology is being deployed. So if I look, for example, at robotic process automation, so RPA may be used by auditors to automate routine manual tasks within the audit. From a standard setting perspective, that would have impacts in terms of things like quality monitoring standards and maybe on audit documentation. Whereas if RPA is used by the audited entity, maybe as part of its accounting process, that would have implications more around maybe ISO 315 around the internal control environment and identification and understanding of risk. So that's the original research. Can everyone hear me okay? I can just hear my mics dropping in and out. So that's the original research. And what I've done is then updated the landscape for the research that we've done so far, and the outreach and the feedback and insights that we've had from talking to various individuals and various parties. So on the next slide here, you'll see this updated maturity model. I won't linger for a long time on this particular slide, but I'll point out a couple of things. One thing you'll notice is I have made some modifications to some of the technology terms that are used compared to the previous landscape. And so I've grouped some together and I've split some out. And the appendix to this presentation actually has a table where you can map the older technologies to this recent update. So you can see how the modifications have taken place. What I've also done is added in some technologies which are sort of broader technology trends as opposed to specific technologies themselves. And I wanted to make sure in doing that we were then capturing the full picture of all of the relevant technologies to audit and assurance. So that's the updated draft, and what we'll do is continue to socialise this updated model with various parties, and obviously we will continue to update it on a periodic basis. So now I just want to move into talking about some of the themes and trends coming out of the research and outreach activities that we've done, and I suspect some of these may not be sort of hugely groundbreaking, but what I would say is that they are themes that we're hearing quite consistently across the sort of various parties that we have had discussions with and the research that we've done. First and foremost, and I guess again it would sort of come as no surprise, the consistent access to appropriate data, and that's not only data for use in sort of basic technologies like sort of data analytics, but also for more complex technologies, so say sort of training AI models. That consistent access to data continues to be a challenge and a barrier to full widespread adoption of a number of different technologies. There are various technologies out there to support with access to data and transformation of data, and I would say that there's been some really great innovations that are making a real difference. So things like APIs, application programming interfaces, and some of the transformation technologies are really making a difference. But there is quite a disparity in terms of the ability to be able to access data across all the various accounting systems and across the capabilities within audit and assurance firms. So just moving on, the technology, the next bullet here around technology adoption, lagging innovation, and I don't think that's necessarily just a reflection of the challenges that we've had in terms of working over the last few years. It's generally the case, and certainly we've heard very many comments about, there's a lot of innovation out there, but it does take time before that innovation then becomes embedded in how people work. And I've put some people-related factors there which have come through quite strongly, but I would say they're not the only factors that are impacting the adoption of technology, but certainly things like skills, expertise, confidence, capacity, and the ability to make that mindset shift and use technology within the audit is still quite prevalent. Moving on, artificial intelligence and machine learning, these are definitely consistently identified as most revolutionary or potentially most revolutionary to the way we do audits, but also within audited entities as well. And they are becoming increasingly used. I would say, though, there continue to be sort of challenges around adoption of those sorts of technologies. So access to appropriate training data, appropriate transparency and governance of training models, and really trust in the technologies across the board, from those that are using them to those that are reviewing them. So, both auditors, audited entities, and regulators. I've just listed up there a few areas that we've seen more prevalently using AI and machine learning, but there are a huge range of different areas. And if you've seen the latest market scan that we had on natural language processing, there is so much AI related technology that is coming into our everyday lives these days. Your favourite subject, Tom, blockchain. There are definitely diverse views around the expected impact of blockchain and related technologies. And you will see from the technology landscape, what I have done is sort of split those out. We did just have a single specific technology, but I've split out digital assets, smart contracts, and blockchain related processes. So they're all in sort of various stages, but the one thing that we are seeing quite significantly come through is the prevalence and in use of digital assets, and that includes everything from cryptocurrencies to things like NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and so auditors are facing the challenges of how do we audit those sorts of things. So things like understanding ownership and valuation of those sorts of assets. So they're certainly coming across that more often now. Last but not least, remote working, and I know this was mentioned earlier, it continues to influence technology innovation, and I think we'll continue to see that. So just an example, remote inventory counts and the need to kind of leverage technology potentially to be able to do that. So those are just some of the sort of main themes from the research and outreach activities. I just wanted to pick up on some of the new technology trends which we've got in the updated landscape. And when I say new, I don't mean suddenly these are new, they've appeared in the last 2 years. It's just that they weren't on the original research, so they are new to that extent. And you'll see that some of these are quite broad technology trends as opposed to specific technologies. So obviously cybersecurity and data governance, the need for cyber resilience, and the increasing prevalence of cyber-related risks. Are presenting challenges for auditors in terms of identifying the nature of those risks and what they mean and how they need to respond to them. Cloud and edge computing, I've put those together because they both sort of represent new and different ways of delivering computing services, and have both opportunities and challenges in terms of data management, data access, and governance. Digital twins is something which is, I've sort of put as an embryonic sort of emerging technology, and it is a more specific technology, and that is effectively a sort of virtual representation of a physical asset or system or process, and it's updated with sort of real-time data and used for things like simulations and monitoring. I think with the increase in sustainability reporting, I think we'll see that becoming more and more excuse me, more and more relevant from an audit and assurance perspective. The last two, again, I have sort of put as embryonic technologies. It would be remiss of me to leave these off, but it's very early days in terms of understanding what impact they may have from an audit and assurance perspective. But obviously, we'll continue to keep a watching brief of those technologies, and as they continue to develop, we'll get a better idea of what they might mean. Okay, so we are at our question for the board, which is the board's asked for its views on the technology innovation trends highlighted. Of particular interest is which technologies are likely to have the greatest impact on audit and assurance. So over to you.
Thank you. It's really amazing how much we're keeping track of this and the thought that's been put in it. And one of the things that, we want to know too, as you're thinking about your observations, is what are the obstacles we need to face? Who are the people we should be engaging in, and on what technologies in the effort to improve audit and assurance quality? Where do we start thinking about, do our standards need to actually reflect more explicitly these technologies as well? So I'd invite some observations and comments right now, or reactions. Anyone want to come in? Kai.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Daniele, and thanks, Amy, for the presentation. One question comes up in my mind, whether it could make sense for the future to split up the technologies in regarding to financial reporting and to sustainability reporting. That could make sense. Maybe we can talk about it. Because, for example, to look a little bit closer, if we talk about NLP or OCR, this is more linked with sustainability reporting and auditing of sustainability reports. Whether NLP and OCR do not play the same role within financial reporting. This is my observations, for example. Thanks.
Okay, Sachiko.
Thank you. Actually, this is my first time to speak today. So hello, everybody. And actually, I have very, very similar comment with Kai Wobe, because, you know, in sustainability reporting is coming, there might be some different technology or impact may be different. So if we continue this monitoring activity, maybe it is worthwhile to think about how sustainability area will impact this map.
Okay, Diane.
Thanks, Tom. First of all, that was a really excellent presentation. And in particular, the slide where you show on the 2022 and you show the progression, but also the circles, the blues and the grays, which comes to my point. I also think, my personal opinion, that we need to think about how technology is being used by the companies that we audit. And then second of all is technology that the auditor could use to enhance their execution. So I particularly like that graph that shows, you know, the gray or the blue, because I do think we are seeing some companies increasing their use of technology to help with processing, financial statement close process. And I think we need to be sensitive to that, to understand, do we need to think about building some auditing, very specific auditing guidance standards to address how the auditor approaches that. At the same time, the tools and mechanisms. I'm particularly sensitive to data. Your first comment on overall observations. In my role, I spent a lot of time with data, and the inconsistencies and the ability to match data sets and get uniform data protocols is unbelievably challenging. And you have great aspirations, but you're always stuck with the data and the integrity of the data. So I think this concept of data integrity and making sure that when you're matching data sets together, you're appropriately matching it. Otherwise, you're on a world of hurt. So overall, great direction. Maybe for me, a little bit more granularity as to what do we want to focus on.
I told him it's a great setup for our next session. Anyone else like to share? So what's interesting, oh, Isabel, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to echo what Kayuva and Sachiko mentioned, because I had exactly the same perception. Maybe when we started this project, we were very focused on audit because it was 3 years ago and that's where we were, and we perceived this need. And now I was wondering, like they do, are all relevant, all these tools relevant for financial statements and or for sustainability reporting, or maybe we need to differentiate some of them, because I believe it will be very relevant for the work we're doing on sustainability assurance.
So, Isabel, could I ask you a favor? Could you put your tent on the other side of your laptop? So when you flip it up, it's, you know.
Yes, thanks, Tom. Yeah, maybe first to start with a compliment for Danielle and Amy for updating the graph. As Diane, I entirely agree. I think this makes a lot more sense in understanding it. And because at its heart, there's two ways to look at this. And I don't have any observations in technologies that I'm missing here, but it is very useful to understand what's out there from the point of view of what do our clients do and how do we attack it? And are our standards still appropriate in dealing with the issues, or do the standards provide roadblocks for it? And I think some of this will come up in the next session when we're talking about our role, etc. And I think we need to be clear that what our role is, not least in light with the discussion we had before as to budget, focus, etc. So looking forward to the next session and compliments for what you guys have done so far.
So I think the observations I want to follow on. Oh, sorry, Eric, let you go first.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for the very good presentation. I really enjoyed the way you sort of explained it. It's helpful. Certainly in terms of the trends, I think they're very consistent with what we're hearing in our jurisdiction. And similar to Diane, I think the number one bullet is the number one bullet for a reason that is being faced by practitioners particularly. I think the one question or the one thing, and maybe it's my lack of understanding of the initiative here is, but I keep asking myself, so where is the profession on this line? Like how much of the profession is where? And maybe that's the granularity that Diane is kind of looking, because it would give more of a sense of where the priorities might need to be if we had that. So it's more an outstanding question in my own mind at this point. Thank you.
So just a couple of observations. I think the insight that Kai and Sachiko raised are important ones that we now should think about how it's applied in the different spheres of audit and assurance. I would caution, in fact, I think probably those technologies are about as relevant in the financial sphere as they are in the world of sustainability. So not to disagree with you, but I do think we have to think across dimensions is the big point. And we did start this when sustainability wasn't that much on our radar screen, but it clearly is going to be with us for some time. Eric, I think the point you made there, I think it's important where the profession is and what's actually happening in practice, but it actually raises a question I keep on asking myself is, at what point do we really care? We've really sort of been neutral, technology neutral. This was a discussion we had at our digital advisory group last, and I think that we'll come on to that a little bit next. But at what point do we as a board sort of go from being neutral to acknowledging that technology is pervasive and the use of it, and then being entirely sort of, we'll deal with this in only application material is it's sort of not reflective. And I just, not saying now is the moment, but I think we're going to be inevitably struck with this. And where do we want to be in terms of pushing for quality? Like we're on one of our topics that comes up later today, this week, is fraud. One of the best use cases of machine learning and AI related tools is fraud detection. At what point do we want to say, well, you would almost be expected? I'm not saying that don't read into this, but at some point, like I think you will, as a regulator or standard setter, be forced at some point in the continuum to raise these issues. And it's important that we have those discussions now. So when it's time, like we're not thinking it's such a radical concept, and then we find ourselves so far behind the curve. So Danielle and Amy, I turn it to you for some observations as well.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. And I completely agree with the points that are made around sustainability. And I agree with your point, Tom, around the technologies being relevant to that non-financial reporting as well. But I do think there may be a way that we can just highlight it a little bit more clearly, and maybe just provide some more perspectives from a sustainability reporting perspective. To your point, Eric, around what do we know about the adoption level across the profession, and I guess the thing I would say is there is still quite a range. So you look at some of the larger audit firms, and they're the sort of forerunners with a lot of this technology, and then some of the smaller firms which are looking to third-party vendors to get some of the technology as opposed to developing it itself. But as Tom was saying, we have had that real discussion around, well, at what point do we need to make a change to really reflect it as the sort of default way of working, as opposed to something that is sort of nice to do if you can. And I think that's, that continues to be something which we need to, kind of keep front of mind. I don't know, Amy, if you have any thoughts.
Nothing more than what you've added. I think it sets us up really nicely for the discussion that we'll be having next, I think.
Kai?
I agree, Daniela, what you have mentioned. There's not only a range between large and smaller one, there's only a range within the firms. Yeah. So if you talk, for example, to forensic people from larger firms, they use AI since a couple of years on a very high level. If you talk to, let me say, normal audit people, they don't use it. Yeah. So we have this range also within the audit firms. Thanks.
Eric?
Yeah, and I agree with the thinking around, well, when is the right time to start talking about this is what the expectation should be. And I think that it would help me if I knew where the profession was. If everybody if the base level is at a certain point, you might go, well, that's reasonable now to have that expectation. Whereas if it's still this big scatter diagram, it becomes more difficult to sort of make those judgments.
Jim?
I thought it was interesting that in your slide on the latter side, on the right side, almost 2 or 3 times you mentioned AI. And I'm not sure how relevant this is, but I was invited to speak with a young tech company, and they were going to use AI to do a test engagement. And they said, I said, well, I think you have to use an accounting firm to do a test. And they said, why? And I said, well, legally you have to, but they said, well, can we just take this and sell it to them, the audit? I was like, well, I don't know, Diane, can I? But it just goes to show you the thinking is very different than maybe some of us in this room.
Okay. I think we can go on to the next section.
Okay. So now we're going to set up the rest of our discussion today. So we mentioned earlier about establishing a digital advisory group. So this slide just has the photos of our current members. And this was really set up primarily to give a different set of perspectives and viewpoints to those obtained as part of usual outreach activities. So it's really made up of individuals, mostly from outside of audit and assurance, but with some strong experience around technology. There's a technology startup founder, digital transformation expert, the chief executive, backgrounds in fintech. And so these different backgrounds and global experience is really put together to try and challenge our thinking away from the people that we normally engage with in standard setting, who kind of may well be used to the status quo of how things are done and have been done for a long time. So the group met in May this year for the first meeting. And I'll now, if we go on to the next slide, talk a little bit about what we talked about. So the first item that we talked about, and we've touched upon this already, is that, are the IAASB playing the right role? So obviously we had to give a bit of a background to some members of the group about who we are, what we do, what's in our remit and what's not as standard setters. But we also just really wanted to kind of seek views and thoughts from them about, are there areas of our role that need challenging or potentially reshaping? And we did hear some themes that were up on the slide there around the extent of the use of technology in auditing standards, the appropriateness of encouraging the use of technology, and our role in convening, communicating, and collaborating with others relating to topics on technology. So they were the big themes that came out there, and you'll see them in more detail in the handout, which we'll be discussing in our breakout group shortly. For the second item that we talked about, Chris Thatcher, who's one of the group members, he used to hold a global assurance innovation leader role at a Big Four, and now his new role in HSBC is he has the pleasure of being audited, so he has the pleasure of being on the other side as well. Really kicked off a discussion about the future of auditing and key trends that he was seeing, and then we opened it up to have a discussion about what the other people in the room were seeing. And a really interesting discussion there, and obviously shaped some of our research. We used what we heard from that. And then finally, we had a discussion about project exploration. So really, what other activities should we or could we consider doing? So coming out of these sessions were lots and lots of ideas. So we organized these into the key themes that you'll see up there. Around accessibility and consumption of auditing standards. So how do people access and consume our auditing standards, and how can technology influence that? Or also barriers to adoption of technology, particularly data, and the attractiveness of the audit profession and what the impact of technology has for actually having auditors and people coming and wanting to come into the profession and the skills that they have. So as I said, the detail around these topics is it we'll be discussing further in our breakout groups coming up. It is worth noting, so obviously the members do not have an audit background, or most of the members do not have an audit background. So as I said, it's really about challenging us, challenging our traditional thinking. So some of the themes do reflect that, but that should make the discussion a bit more exciting. So being able to kind of think outside the box a little bit. So I think with that, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add here, because I think we're finishing a little bit early.
It would be an opportunity too, if done, is to, if anyone wanted to ask us about the digital advisory group as well, its function and the conversation or the themes before we go into breakout. We're ready to do the breakout. So we have scheduled to 3:30 for the breakout sessions. I say maybe take 5 to 10 minutes to get ready, get your cup of coffee if you need a short break. And I say that we should be convening, let's say by 2:30 in your respective locations. Now, does everyone know where their breakout groups are located? You should have a sheet like this in front of you. If anyone doesn't have it, raise their hand. We'll make sure you get one, or tell you where you need to go. Okay, so this will end the public session of the board today. Let me just say on the public record, great job presenting and setting us up for a conversation. We really look forward to this discussion. Everyone convene in your set location by 2:30. Okay. And the one other thing I would say while we're here, we're not reconvening, right? So I wanted to give 2 seconds. Lynn, would you like 2 seconds to give an update for tomorrow on sustainability and what to expect?
Yes. thanks for everybody who's given us comments so far. If anyone else has got them, that would be really valuable if we can have them as soon as possible, please. We've got a task force meeting straight after tomorrow's meeting. Tomorrow is going to be a real mixture of planning and doing and detail and approach. So the first session we'll have will be on the project proposal, and we'll incorporate some of the comments that we've heard from you, but we'll also expect them to be on the public record. We'll then look at the structure, which is once again approach, not a set in stone. Whereas the definitions, we want some real guidance because we want to start shaping those up to be the guides for the rest of the work. We'll then look at the structure, the ISAs and which ones are in and which ones are out, potentially. And if we get time, we'll move on to the requirements. And there we're not looking at the detail, we're looking at the approach. So that's why it's a mixture of project proposal planning, and you can be sure I'll get confused about what we're doing and what we're planning, because it's really hard when you're doing them basically concurrently. But I also will be asking you to keep the comments high level and on approach, not into detail, because we're not at drafting yet. We're into, is this looking like a sensible way for us to proceed? So I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I'm looking forward to real debate in this issue, because the more debate we get, the more input we get, the better it's going to be for our drafting that we're going to do before December. So look forward to it.
Okay, and one more logistical issue. Sue, anything to say to your task force? I know you're due to meet this evening.
Yeah, probably just don't run off. So we'll, if we can, we'll start when we finish the breakouts, and we'll get going quickly. And I think Phil will have let us know where it is we need to be.
Okay. Okay, let's start at 2:30-ish. If it's a minute or two late, that's fine. And then we'll go for an hour. This is the last of the session as plenary today. There's no report back. We'll gather it and report back at a later point. But again, we really have benefited in these discussions. For sustainability was the last time, but also we've done some on technology before. So this is really going to be a valuable session for us. So thank you. Thank you to our public observers. We'll see everyone again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We begin with strategy tomorrow. Okay.